Be sure to check out these other places where you can find Pause Break. When it comes to Sega's Sonic the Hedgehog games, April 1995's Knuckles Chaotix is a real black sheep for the series. The classic Mega Drive titles have been ported and re-released more times than we can count, Sonic Adventure DX gave the less popular Game Gear titles a new lease on life, and Sonic Gems Collection even gave niche entries like Sonic R, Sonic the Fighters, and Sonic CD a second chance. But Knuckles' Chaotix remains doomed to obscurity, cursed to wallow on the 32X for all time. Unless you count that really brief period it was on GameTap, but that doesn't count. But that's not all that's unusual about it. Knuckles is the star this time around with no Sonic in sight save for the metal variety, and that wouldn't happen in a main series game again until 2005's Shadow the Hedgehog. There's a weird tag team mechanic that wouldn't be attempted again until Sonic Advance 3. The other members of the Chaotix team would go missing for 8 years before showing up as if nothing happened in Sonic Heroes, or 23 years in the case of Mighty the Armadillo, who vanished off the face of the earth. So basically, Chaotix is something of an oddity, and you know I'm all about the oddities on this channel, so let's give our 32X Retrospective a grand finale by taking a gander. There really isn't much to the plot here. Eggman created a new carnival fortress on Angel Island following his defeat in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and utilizes the power of an ancient artifact called the Chaos Ring to take it over, with an eye on world domination in the long run. Not as if any of this matters though, because it's something that doesn't really come up in-game. There's no exposition or explanation of anything going on, but you know, it's Sonic. Does it really need an epic or convoluted story? Actually, don't answer that. I know that's exactly what some of you weirdos want. Once you start up the game, you're treated to a brief little introduction where you play as Knuckles and catch Robotnik trapping Espio the Chameleon in a capsule. After ye old egg runs off and Metal Sonic comes along to show off that sweet sprite scaling, the two of you join together on a magical journey. Each holding a ring and with a band of sparkles between you, you're off through the tutorial level, ready to be introduced to the world of Cankles Schizophrenix and its main gimmick. Remember how in Sonic 2 and 3, Tails would run and jump around behind you and he could sometimes get caught on things or stuck somewhere trying to get back to you, but eventually he'd end up just dropping in from above as if nothing even happened? Was that something you liked, or did you sit there and think, no thank you, I'd prefer it if I had to lug Tails around with me everywhere and worry about him pulling me off a ledge if he doesn't make a jump like some sort of furry remake of Touching the Void? Well, if that's the case, this is the game for you. In Crumples by Polix, that band between you and your partner is much like an edgy MySpace teen in that it's both your worst friend and your best enemy. Pressing the B button allows you to stop your partner on a dime, allowing you to stretch the band and slingshot off in the other direction. Pro tip, the game really wants you to do this, so it nerfed the spin dash massively. You can also pick your partner up with the same button in order to throw them places, and if they end up getting stuck somewhere, which definitely happens from time to time, a simple press of the A button is all it takes to call them back to your location for a small fee of 10 rings. Surprisingly, if you abuse this ability, the game has no problem putting you into a ring deficit, where collected rings will slowly count back up to 0. And just like real life, you die when you go too far into debt. But anyway, if you thought Knuckles and Espio were the only characters you got to play as, you'd be incorrect, as there's a lot of different tag team combinations to try out. Gameplay is generally tailored to Knuckles the Echidna, who has the ability to glide through the air and climb up walls, but Chaotix also allows you to take control of 4 other characters. Vector the Crocodile, who's lighter than Knuckles and gets a small air dash plus wall climbing, Espio the Chameleon, a heavier character that can run along walls and ceilings, Mighty the Armadillo, who handles mostly the same as Sonic would in a regular game but only has a wall jump, and last but not least, Charmy B, the smallest and lightest of the crew. He can dive through enemies in 8 directions, and his flight ability makes Tails look like a total chump with how broken it is. The level design is completely trivial when you can just fly through everything. Though you can pick up any one of these to take control of and lead the charge, your teammate is chosen by this claw grabber minigame, where you're offered any of the other members plus 2 other less than desirable characters in the form of Robotnik's helper mechanics, Heavy and Bomb. Heavy is, as his namesake implies, very heavy. If you make a jump and he doesn't tough tits, you're getting dragged down with him. And that happens a lot given how he has the lowest jump height and slowest acceleration in the game by a long shot. Bomb, on the other hand, is mostly fine, if a bit on the wimpy and erratic side. His main issue is that if he gets hit, he'll let off a large explosion that can catch you in its radius too. You'll want to avoid these guys always, they're the duds. But what kind of wondrous lands do we have to go through in this game? Well, if you thought Sonic CD was bright and flashy, Pimple's Narcissistics will show you just how zany classic Sonic can get. Though Knuckles himself looks a little odd at times, the rest of the character sprites are all expressive, bright, and a lot of fun, and that goes double for the background and level set pieces. Everything's so garish and high contrast, but it all moves very smoothly, and slow down is rare. Sometimes things can get a little bit too busy looking for my liking, but overall I'm actually quite a big fan of how it looks, and that goes double for the characters. Of course, this only goes for the 2D main stages. Getting 50 rings in a level will allow you to go to the special stages rendered in Once the initial shock of that wears off, though, be prepared to feel disoriented and motion sick from how jerky everything is and how the camera often doesn't show you what's around particular turns and hills until it's way too late to really do anything about it. But music is really the highlight here. Even if it isn't anything particularly groundbreaking from the 32X on a technical level, Junko Shiratsu and Mariko Nanba's soundtrack, particularly songs like Door into Summer, Speed of Sound, and Midnight Greenhouse, can hold their own alongside even the best Sonic songs, and Child Song is such a catchy little tune that Nanba would end up reusing its main melody in Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg. Surprisingly, this was one of the first projects for them to work on, and when you look at it like that, is it any wonder that between the two of them they ended up composing for games like Panzer Dragoon Zwei, Space Channel 5 Part 2, Sonic Rush Adventure, and Colors? Either way, it'll provide you some great tunes to listen to as you zip through these levels. Well, you'll zip sometimes anyway. This is some of the worst level design in the Sonic franchise, with scale being a particularly egregious problem. Levels either take longer to get through than even the biggest ones in Sonic 3, or are over in just 30 seconds, and it's rare that any of the platforming demands you to be good at the game or to do any more than the very basics with your arsenal of moves. Most of the time you'll just be running along without anything to stop you, and badniks aren't placed in such a way that makes you rethink your route so much as smacked into your path when you're going at such a high speed you can't feasibly react to them. They feel more like a chore to get out of the way than something fun and something that alters the general gameplay dynamic, and it's just annoying. Oh, and unlike most Sonic games, you have to deal with each zone for a total of 5 acts now. You know what's good about the 2-act structure that we've come to know across the series? You're never stuck in one place for too long, and it doesn't get stale. Going through the same locations over and over again sucks the energy out of me because I feel like I'm not making any progress, and it gets really repetitive really quick. I suppose it's fine though, after all you can probably— wait, the zone you go to is chosen at random? Okay, going through levels in a set order makes the game cohesive, so that's a plus for that approach, and getting to choose which order you do the zones lets you get the bad stuff out of the way quick, but random? Who thought this was a good idea? It just means the pacing of boss fights is all super lopsided. And Chaotix's generally haphazard design makes sense when you know how turbulent and rushed the production process was. Our earliest glimpse into the development comes from a leaked engine test called Sonic Crackers dated April 1994. That's only 12 and a bit months before the final game hits store shelves, and that's an incredibly short amount of time to pull together a game from scratch, especially for new hardware. On top of that, unused graphics show that Sonic was initially meant to be a playable character before being switched for Mighty the Armadillo, and graphical similarities are very apparent between them. And though buggy, certain early prototypes of the game even have codes for Tails' flight mechanic on an unused character slot. However, a rushed development schedule is not an excuse for a subpar game, and it would seem even Sega knew how this game was going to end up because they took their main man out of it and relegated it to spin-off land before it could do damage to the overall brand. But back to the game itself. Once the levels are beaten, it's on to the final boss fight against Metal Sonic. In the first phase, he hooks himself up to the level selection bumper and turns it against you, with those panels you randomly selected before now being used as weapons against you. I actually really like this concept. It's fun seeing something that's been a constant throughout the game get turned against you, but I'm not a fan of how precise your timing has to be to actually deal any damage. The luck factor can really draw this fight out, but after you seemingly win, Robotnik uses the giant Chaos Ring's capabilities to turn Metal Sonic into a giant monstrous version called Metal Sonic Kai for you to take on face to face. This is around the point where things really start to shit the bed. It's supposed to be the climax, but it just feels so weak. A lot of sound effects are missing, so nothing Metal does has any weight to it, and he has no real presence either given how limited his animation is. Outside of the 3D arena, it's not even graphically impressive. I feel like I'm fighting a PNG here, and the whole thing is super easy too. Simply dodge his laser, deal with his claws, and you should have him beaten within moments, but depending on whether or not you beat all the special stages, it might not even matter. If you've not got all 7 Chaos Rings, they won't be able to overpower the giant Chaos Ring, and instead they'll get Thanos out of existence while Robotnik laughs at your expense. Metal Sonic Kai soars over a burning city, and since you can't go back to any of the levels by this point, game over, you failed. Try again on a new save, this one's now useless. All 7 though? Well, that's cool. And the game thinks it's so cool that it just kinda stops. Everyone poses, Sonic and Tails turn up to make their contractually obliged appearance, and that's it. What happened to Robotnik and Metal Sonic, or the Carnival Island? Who knows? This city sure as hell isn't the location you were in before, so you get no real conclusion, and the ending just feels hurried, slapdash, chaotic. Yeah, chaotic. Chaotix sure is an apt title for this mess. It's definitely a good-looking game. Between the in-game sprites and the Japanese manual's illustrations, it's actually got some of my favourite art styles for the whole Sonic series, and the music is fantastic too. But the actual gameplay feels janky and unpolished. The rubber band mechanic is more of a hindrance than a help. Levels are repetitive to nauseam, boss fights range from meh to yuck, and the special stages are an absolute chore. All in all, this game is just not worthwhile. It's steeped in mediocrity, and I think it would be in the same nobody cares camp as Sonic Spinball if it weren't for the forbidden fruit ideal of being on such an obscure system as the 32X. But for now, our retrospective for the console is over, and it can be forgotten about as it had been before.